Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hi, welcome to NDIS Property Australia's latest podcast. My name is Min, and I'm here with a special guest speaker, Rob Maxwell from Plan for Life Australia. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Min. Happy to be here.
Rob, tell me all about you. What's your story here in Melbourne?
I'm the Director of Plan for Life Australia. We're a short-term and medium-term accommodation provider for NDIS participants, predominantly looking at country locations such as Albury-Wodonga, so that the participants can take anywhere from 2 days to a week away on a holiday for a short-term accommodation. So we will be helping them with that.
Wonderful. Rob, so tell us our audience, more about the SDA market in Melbourne at the moment with regards to various issues like builder challenges who want to go into NDIS, or land supply and supply chain issues and product mixes as well. What's your feedback on the overall SDA market with all these topics here?
In terms of house and land builds, Melbourne is probably a little bit behind Queensland and New South Wales in terms of where they're at with building these type of properties and the builders that are actually involved in the segment. I've been dealing with builders for the last 2 years, and pretty much in every case, the builders start off showing an interest in developing a business in building NDIS properties. They then do the work, but because it's not their core business, they're used to just building traditional houses. This is obviously a lot more complicated, as you and your audience know, in terms of what they have to do and have to get everything assessed and approved. And because of the situation in the world financially, builders obviously are under a little bit of pressure over the last 12 or 18 months. Costs have exploded in terms of builds. They've got supply chain issues. They've got staffing issues. The cost of slabs is increasing enormously. So most of the builders in Melbourne that have looked at this sector have decided over the last 12 months not to pursue it, or they've put it on hold. Therefore, there have been very few houses built. Apartments, a little bit different. It's probably a little bit more advanced. But it is a big opportunity, and now a couple of the bigger builders are getting involved in the sector that they're more comfortable that going forward it will be profitable for them.
Wow, wonderful. So with your background in the construction industry the last few years, how have prices fluctuated or gone up the last year or so since the pandemic began with COVID?
With the traditional house build,
prices?
I'd say prices in Melbourne would have gone up 20 to 30%, predominantly in areas such as the timber frames, or steel frames, the concrete slabs, waffle pods. Everything is going up significantly in price. So a lot of the builders that have signed fixed price contracts, as they do with what we're dealing here with the NDIS properties, have got themselves into a little bit of a cash flow squeeze going forward, because they've committed to prices that now are probably another $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to build.
Yeah.
But I think they're getting on top of that now, and they're more comfortable going forward to be able to offer these products.
Is there going to be much of easing of the land supply pipeline coming out for the next year or 2 years?
There is a decent amount of land available, not necessarily new estates. They're going very quickly. There's still enormous demand for new land. It's selling still really quickly. But there is a lot of land on the secondary markets that you can get in new estates, pretty much all across Melbourne, Geelong, Ballarat region. You're probably looking on average, if you're looking at a new block in an estate, 6 to 12 months waiting. But there are options, as I mentioned, for land to access a lot quicker.
Yeah, wonderful. So this, just so the audience can be more aware, this morning Rob and myself went to a large firm in Melbourne City talk about the benefits, the pros and cons of considering SDA as a investment option for their property clients. It was good for us to be able to talk to professionals who are in the property and finance game to understand more about the NDIS market overall and the SDA specifically. Rob, what's your assessment with regards to the demand or the categories that are in most sought after by investors at the moment in the Victorian market at the moment?
Okay, compared to the rest of Australia, there's currently more demand in fully accessible and robust, particularly robust. Very few houses being built in that sector, and there are a lot of participants now looking for housing that they cannot find. So there's definite demand there, also fully accessible.
So we're talking demand, not delivery or supply, right?
That's the demand side, yes.
What's being supplied in the marketplace right now?
Okay, in terms of what's being supplied, high physical is roughly about 55% of the overall market, a little bit in Victoria, compared to about 65-70% Australia-wide, so a little bit lower. Robust is actually fractionally higher, but as I mentioned, the demand's there, hence why it's a good category to look to build. Fully accessible also is up near 20% versus roughly 10% Australia-wide, and improved livability is pretty much similar at about 8% in Victoria compared to Australia.
So, Rob, we're from Brisbane, and we work with a lot of different providers and builders all around Australia. What we've noticed in Melbourne is there seems to be a lot of investors and product suppliers by way of head lease, rent guarantees, head leases, the 8% on the products out there. It's kind of strange to see that only in Melbourne and nowhere else. Rob, what's your opinion about these head leases at 8%? That seems to be a lot of investors being hooked into, and thinking it's the greatest thing in the world. What's your opinion about that product?
Well, builders and developers are offering the 8% because Victoria may be a little bit more conservative than other parts of Australia, and an 8% return is still very attractive in this sector to guarantee tenants. However, as we know, if the investor takes the chance to engage us or find tenants themselves and not sign these head leases, then they're going to end up with a better return than that, probably closer to 10%.
But there's a little catch there, Rob, and that is these 8% head leases given by Sills and other housing providers in Victoria have a catch. Do you know what the catch is?
That it's not guaranteed, or?
Well, there's no CPI for 20 years. That's the first one.
It's a huge difference. Over 20 years, that's halving your return towards the back end.
And the other catch is the 8% is only up to a maximum price of $600,000, even though you spend $900,000 on the purchase price. So it's not 8% on the purchase price; it's 8% to a maximum of $600,000.
Okay, so you're talking 5 to 6% in reality. Then in Melbourne, you're looking at $800,000 to $900,000 for a house and land package in this sector.
So if all you get is $48,000 as a head lease with no CPI on a purchase price of $800,000 to $1 million, that's around about 5% yield for a SDA investment. Now,
correct. Very attractive for a builder and a developer, though. Therefore, very profitable business for them.
But why would it not be attractive to an investor? This 5% return for 20 years at no CPI.
Because they can get 10% indexed to CPI, which in 15 years' time will actually be closer to 20%.
Yeah.
So it actually is a huge difference when you work out the figures over time.
So to all you listeners out there who are blinded by this awesome 8% head lease, be careful. Watch out for the terms and conditions, because it may not be as great when you do the real numbers, I guess. Yeah. So Rob, tell us more about supply chain issues with around the world and with the market, and will things get better for the SDA property investors who want to jump into SDA property investment?
Well, now that COVID seems to be, touch wood, improving worldwide, you'd think that the supply chain bottlenecks that have occurred over the last 18 months will gradually ease, maybe not for another 3 or 6 months. I think the general view amongst builders is that prices will continue to stay high for that time frame, but maybe we'll have a little bit of easing in 6 to 12 months' time off the pricing, which will make it easier for everybody.
Okay, wonderful. Next topic is areas around Melbourne or Victoria. I mean, you've been here for how long have you been living in Melbourne yourself for?
My entire life.
Your entire life.
I won't tell you exactly how long that is, but as you know, it's 50-odd years.
So what are the hotspots, do you think, for demand of SDA participants, in your opinion, for Melbourne, or Melbourne, Victoria, yeah?
Yeah, well, there's a few specific areas that seem to have significant demand and not a lot of supply. The southeast of Melbourne, which is a major growth area for all sorts of property, and you're probably looking at about 900,000 to build one of these properties in that area. That's got enormous demand, all the way down to Clyde and Berwick and all the way down to Warragul into Gippsland. That is a definite area for investors to look at. Then on the other side of town, in the mid-northwest, so around your Tullamarine, Greenvale and a bit further out, there's also another pocket where there's significant demand for these properties and very little supply there. The west of Melbourne has always got increasing demand because it's such a growth corridor. So there's always going to be plenty of people with disabilities looking for properties around the Wyndham Vale, Werribee, Lara area. And the one that also has got very little supply currently, may change, but significant demand is also the Geelong greater area, all the way down to Armstrong Creek. So there's probably 4 or 5 areas in the outskirts of Melbourne where it's affordable, all growth areas where these properties are desirable.
So just for the benefit of our listeners on the podcast, do you not think, would an investor think Geelong, Ballarat, Bendigo is a bit too far as an investment property for SDA, do you think?
No, well, as you know, with COVID and with the lifestyle changes and people not necessarily going into the office in the city every day of the week, it's actually become a very good investment option, full stop, and a lifestyle option to live and invest down in Geelong, Ballarat and Bendigo. So I don't see that changing over the next few years, and I think a lot of people with disabilities are quite happy to live down in Geelong near the beach.
So what are the population figures for Geelong, Ballarat, Bendigo per se?
I think Ballarat's probably got about 100 to 150,000 people, but it's growing enormously. The new estate's going up in Ballarat and it's expanding rapidly. Geelong itself, there's probably about 250,000 people, and the growth in Geelong is happening in the corridor between Geelong and Torquay, all the way down. Eventually, that's going to be housing all the way down. Whereas 10 years ago, it was a half an hour drive to get from Geelong to Torquay, and there was no housing.
Yep.
So that entire corridor is going to become housing. It will have plenty of infrastructure and amenities suitable for people with disabilities. So it's very likely they're going to be very interested in living down there where it's a slightly more relaxed lifestyle near the beach.
Have you been seeing much in the last year or so of institutional investors creating apartment complexes or strata titled product in the marketplace as compared to house and land? Or should I say, what do you think is more the prevalent products coming out to the marketplace, apartments or houses?
I think in Victoria, because Victoria, similar to Sydney or more specifically Melbourne, is a financial capital with big super funds and big developers, that the apartment market was the most attractive for them initially. So Victoria actually, and Melbourne specifically, has a high proportion of apartments relative to other types of NDIS homes. So the last 2 years, that's been the focus in that area. But I think that will change when the demand shifts more towards house and land and maybe townhouses as well.
Right.
Melbourne has got a high proportion of apartments.
Yep.
Versus other areas of Australia, and also more villas and duplexes and townhouses, but less homes than the rest of Australia. But I think that imbalance will switch back over time.
Rob, you mentioned to me the other day one of your friends works for a SIL provider.
Yes.
And he gets a lot of inquiries himself in his role as operations manager with regards to participants with the robust categories as well. What has he told you about the demand of robust participants, as example, to their company that they operate?
He's currently got 30 participants waiting for a home. They can't currently get one, and he would be able to have another 2 to 3 participants per week that are contacting him looking for a home. So there's 150 to 200 people in the next 12 months minimum that can't find housing in this sector in the robust homes that need it.
Can you explain what a robust home is and what kind of participants it's designed to house?
Robust homes are designed for participants that have mental challenges of some degree. So they might be reformed alcoholics, they might have a drug problem, they might have a domestic violence problem in their history because of mental issues. Therefore, the homes themselves need to be built to a higher level to withstand any potential issues with physical violence, or, for instance, they might want to punch a wall or hit a wall. They also, because they're very sensitive to light and sensory issues and also sound, these homes need to have a level of soundproofing, and the lighting needs to be done in a way that it makes it a more peaceful environment. And they also have to have provisions for the carers to be able to easily leave the property if there's a problem. So they're just a higher level of build in terms of the structure that needs to be a lot more solid than a traditional home, with soundproofing, and also they've got to minimise the ability for self-harm within the home.
I think there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding in the marketplace from investors about the robust category. You mentioned that there is high demand and there's minimal supply. I mean, how much supply is there in the marketplace of SDA at the moment, in Victoria specifically?
There's very little in the robust. Roughly 10% of the property is well below the demand. Now, the issue that investors have probably had and why they've shied away is for the potential for damage to their properties that could cause financial loss. But there's a very wide spectrum of participants that are in the robust category. A lot are perfectly fine, reformed alcoholics, reformed drug addicts, or have come from a family that have had those issues, that are just looking to have companions to talk to and go for a walk with, that are not violent at all. You can get the extreme that potentially do have violence, but you do have the ability to screen potential tenants, particularly with the situation at the minute where there's a lot of demand and very little supply. So you can be a little bit more choosy with the type of tenant that you're comfortable with.
Just to show how much funding goes towards a robust participant, what is the range of amount the government funds for SIL funding for a robust participant?
And this actually shocked me when I saw the figures and was told, but currently it's roughly $1 million to $1.5 million per year of funding per participant. And some of them have got funding for 2 carers at once. So it's a lot of money. But it's still cheap relative to what it would cost to house these people in hospitals and nursing homes.
Is that 2 carers 24/7?
Can be, depending on the level of the robust participants' disability.
Wasn't there a year ago, you told me a story about a participant in robust category who needed 5 carers? It was a very extreme scenario a long time ago. You told me about that.
That's quite possible.
Yeah.
I can't remember the specific case, but that could be possible.
Yeah.
And that might be at the extreme end.
Yep.
from a violence and potential issue there.
It must be pointed out that the robust category design home does also cater for improved livability participants, right?
Yes, pretty much everything bar high physical support and fully accessible.
So based on that, what is the participants seeking SDA as per robust versus improved livability then?
Improved livability overall Australia-wide, as you're aware, and I mentioned in your other podcasts, it's roughly about 70% of the entire participants requiring NDIS homes, and there's currently not over 900 in the improved livability category who are seeking housing versus under 200 for robust. So it's 4 or 5 times as many.
Yep.
So there's plenty of demand for improved livability as an option as well.
We often tell our clients, just because you have or you decide thinking about building a robust designed home doesn't mean you have to have robust participants. It is.
No. You could easily put 2 or 3 improved livability participants in the home. The rental would be slightly less, but still very attractive. You're still looking at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12% per annum.
Exactly. And even if you didn't want, if you did not even want to have a SDA participant in the house, you could easily rent it out to a normal mum and dad family.
Correct. As a last resort, you can always rent it out to a normal family or even an elderly couple that might have medical issues with walking around with hip replacements that are more than happy to have the ramps and everything in the housing. It actually is attractive for them as well.
So therefore, it begs the question, would a normal family living in a robust home, can they tell it is a robust home?
Technically not, no, because a lot of it's unseen.
Behind the wall,
yeah. And soundproofing is good for any family. We all like double brick and double glazed windows for soundproofing purposes.
Yeah, because a media room of a house essentially is a breakout room, or
correct,
sensory room.
Yep.
Okay, so it's essentially a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car with a media room as a normal house anyway. So the goal of these houses is to allow comfort for the participants to live a normal life in the community. Yeah.
And you have wider hallways, wider doors, which is attractive for anyone, for any home. Everyone wants a bigger hallway.
Exactly. So before we finish up for the podcast today, Rob, what's the long-term view of Victoria in the overall SDA Australia market?
I think it's a very good opportunity for investors to build these homes, at least for the next 5 or 10 years. We can never be sure what's going to happen after that. But of all the areas in Australia, I think it's a very good opportunity. And now we've got builders that are comfortable to pursue the sector. It makes it, well worth looking into.
We, from NDIS Property Australia's point of view, as a business, we are very bullish on Victoria and Melbourne. The reason being is the penetration rate of SDA into the market in Melbourne, or Victoria, is only 13%. And then our opinion is because of the lack of land supply the last few years, the builders being so focused on first home buyers, the challenges of being a SDA builder itself in Melbourne, builders being builders, the path of least resistance is to build a normal house. So obviously the gap between supply and demand is growing by the day, and now that land's coming back to a normality, a normal kind of balance in the Melbourne market, I think we're going to see more opportunities to build SDA homes in Melbourne, no matter what it is, improved livability or robust or HBS and so forth. But one thing you mentioned this morning at the meeting at the office of this other company, you mentioned about the hybrid design home from this one of these big builders, which we won't mention the name, obviously, but what's so unique about this special hybrid model that we talked about today?
This hybrid home, it will be able to cater pretty much for all 4 categories. It's a combined, robust, high physical support, approved and assessed category. Therefore, you can have a mixture of any of the 4 in the home, and it's very cost effective. It's only a little bit more expensive than a high physical or a robust home.
Wow.
So it just gives an investor more option to have more participants in the different categories.
But surely the cost would be massive to having a hybrid. Surely.
No, we're talking $20,000 roughly.
And that's all. Wow, that is amazing. So when would an investor not choose the hybrid model?
If their budget doesn't allow them to spend the extra money, I could suggest is probably the
extra $20,000.
Yeah, correct.
So there's no reason to not do it then.
Not really, because you're giving yourself more options down the track in terms of rental potential.
So just so we're clear, we're talking about a fully accessible, wheelchair-friendly house.
That's almost also robust friendly as well.
So robust, improved livability, HPS, fully accessible, at the same price, effectively.
For an extra $20,000 roughly, yes.
That's amazing.
And I don't think that's available in too many places on the market, if any.
And a comparison of this hybrid cost compared to other prices around Australia?
Well, we think at the minute the prices that we've secured with our builders are actually very competitive. They're significantly lower than other parts of Australia. And that may change as supply costs increase, but we're more than comfortable with the pricing that we've been given.
I think from an investor's point of view, they're after cash flow and yields. And investors do seek a SDA investment for different reasons. One could be to have a social impact in the community. One is to provide for a family member who may be in need of a SDA home. Others could be yields focus only, and others could be cash flow only. So I guess this flexible product, being a hybrid build, is really effective from my investor's point of view long term, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, just another option for you all to consider.
Wow. Well, we look forward to hearing more about that, Rob, in the coming few weeks as we fly down to Melbourne quite regularly to spend time with developers, builders, and third parties. We're very excited to launch our business into the Melbourne market with various partners like yourself. And thanks so much for your time, Rob. Talk to you soon.
All right, thanks, Ben. Happy to help, and let's see how we can help your investors.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.